The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are pleased to welcome back, officially this time, Pennsylvania Speaker of the House of Representatives, Joanna McClinton. Joanna becomes just the second African American and the first woman to become the Speaker of the House of Representatives. This is the second time she made history. The first time occurred in 2018, when she became the first woman and the first African American to be elected chairwoman of the House Democratic Caucus. Joanna is a lifelong resident of Philadelphia and a graduate of Grace Temple Christian Academy. She became active in her community at an early age. She went on to earn a degree in political science from LaSalle University. She continued her postgraduate education by earning a Juris Doctorate degree from Villanova University School of Law. While there, she interned at the Regional Housing Legal Services, as well as interning at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. As a lawyer, Joanna became Chief Assistant Public Defender for Philadelphia. In 2013, she left that post to become Chief Counsel to Pennsylvania Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, where she was integrally involved in policy development and legislation. Among her many distinctions, she was named to Philadelphia's and Pennsylvania's top 40 under 40 list. She was the Barrister Association's Philadelphia Outstanding Young Lawyer of the Year. She was named by Fun Time magazine Women of Influence Award, and she was also selected by the Black Gala Women for the Excellence Award. We look forward to talking to the Speaker today about her Thursday visit with the United States President Joe Biden, as he visited Philadelphia to promote his budget proposals and speak on the issues he perceives face working-class Americans. We will also be discussing the governor's budget address and the prospects for bipartisan agreement on key budget items. Again, we congratulate Joanna on her historic accomplishment.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Madam Speaker, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I should say again, I had left that show with asking you, I hope that we can call on you to become a regular guest, and you have graciously agreed again to do the show. And I think it's probably appropriate for this show in particular. We had left off with me effectively anointing you in a historic fashion that you were going to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. And you sit here today, 3 months later, and you are, congratulations, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. But having said that, it wasn't exactly a straight, easy path to that speakership. Can you walk us through what you can of how that all unfolded and why you now finally officially sit as Speaker?
Absolutely, Chuck. Thank you so much for having me back. It's great to be here, and to all of your viewers, it is good to get into your homes. I am excited to share that on our swearing-in day, Tuesday, January the 3rd, as you so eloquently laid out, although we had won in 102 districts, we were down 3 seats, and we needed a compromise candidate because, surprisingly, my Republican colleague, the leader, was not running to be Speaker, even though there were 101 Republicans on the floor to the 99 Democrats. And they put up a candidate for Speaker, and the first person they put up was a member of our caucus, Representative Mark Rozzi from Berks County, who spent his whole career fighting for victims of childhood sexual abuse to be able to have access to justice and go to court and fight for what belongs to them in terms of being able to be made whole for the wrongs they suffered. So Representative Rozzi was nominated, he was seconded, and as soon as I could talk, I said I was proud to support him too, because I am aware and was then that I did not have 3 votes from the Republican caucus, which I would have needed. And it's nothing bad about running and losing, but if you don't have to run and lose and you already know the votes shake up, then why put yourself through it? Mark is a friend, and he did a great job as our speaker in the interim period where we had special elections, as you said, February the 7th. And he also did a statewide tour where he went around to hear what the concerns of Pennsylvanians are as it relates to the House, how we operate, how we function, how we can improve. And he came back with a proposal for rules that we implemented on my first full day as speaker.
Wow. I mentioned to you, Speaker, that, you know, kind of using my own political history, I had been questioned by a number of people because they had seen your show, of course. And as I make my ways around the state doing various things, people would ask, wonderful guest, wow, she sounds like she would have been dynamite as speaker. You know, what happened? And there was some, well, what do you think? I heard all kinds of crazy stories and conspiracy theories. Well, Rozzi may want to keep it once he sees the power he has, because if he doesn't decide to support Joanna McClinton, you're not the speaker, because now you don't have the votes. It was only a 1-vote plurality. Well, he obviously did the right thing, but here's what I said to them, and I'll say to you now on the air, is that your achievements and your qualifications, from public defender to the things you've done in your life, which in my I reminded my audience of your accomplishments. And I also said the political acumen that she possesses in skill set, you don't get to be minority leader of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania in the House of Representatives without knowing how to navigate controversies, sidestep a few landmines, pick the right fork in the road as time dictates and as issues arise. You have always done that and ended up on the right side. So it came as no surprise to me, and I said that I predicted you would after the special election be speaker, and here you sit as speaker. I'm fond of sayings and adages. There's another one I'll trot out. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. And you now wear that crown. And welcome to the speakership. You get to there right in time for our new governor, Josh Shapiro's State of the State, or budget address as it's known. And we start right into an issue you're going to have to confront. On the good side, he put a record historic number into public education, several $100 million more than had been previously spent, which is somewhere almost approaching $600 million. It's a little under $600 million. However, having said that, we also know, and I've already read stories, that lawyers are threatening to file suit because the Commonwealth Court had said the formula that was in existence was unconstitutional and wrong, and I think we agree that it was. It was unfair for the poor districts. But according to that formula, he would have needed to get into billions with the amount appropriated, and of course he did not. So I think the exact quote from the governor when he was questioned after his address was, I'm going to sit down with the leaders in the House and the Senate to start working on how we can get to where that formula says we should be. I'm sure his first stop was you. So why don't you talk a little bit about the issue you now face? And look, we all face in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and all the poor school districts who we all want to have adequate educational funding.
Absolutely. So the school districts that you're referencing, I serve Delaware County. William Penn School District was the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit that went up to the Commonwealth Court, where they decided that our funding is not fair. It's inequitable. Some children have great schools, other children do not have good opportunities. And we're talking about public education. Everyone should have a good quality public education, public school, right near where they live. So from Yeadon and Darby in Delaware County, all the way up to Scranton. We need to make sure that every dollar goes through the funding formula. I have sat down with Governor Shapiro and my colleagues in the House, and we don't have a plan today, but we will be working towards getting our funding equitable. The decision was very clear, hundreds of pages of a decision, not, a 10-page or a 20-page, several hundred pages, almost 1,000 pages, in which the judge who decided that we are not fairly funding our schools lays out the case as to why it's not fair that some schools have, more English language learners. Some schools have more children with special needs. We have to consider that, and we have to to put the dollars through that formula so that the zip codes no longer determine the outcomes for children. I'm sure it's not unusual to where I live in the Southeast. You see it in Northeast where people look and they say, okay, I'm going to move here on this block in this area so my child can go to this school district. And we want to have to eliminate that so that all our kids can get good quality public education. And we also have to figure out at the state level, how can we fill the gap with the funding? Where will we get the money that needs to be invested? Will some come from the rainy day fund? Will we have new revenues of income? We have to communicate that and get a plan together.
In a lot of areas throughout Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, Speaker, we have very substandard public education. It's extremely underfunded. Let me speak to, which is the center of our media market here in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, in the Scranton School District, one of the larger ones in the Commonwealth. They were facing long-term debt of $40 million, and they were facing an existing budget gap of $18 million that had accumulated over some mismanagement and improper, let's say, political decisions. But nonetheless, they were entering distress status. They were bankrupt, effectively. And they had found in the formulas that they employed, they were owed literally tens of millions of dollars from the state because of the unconstitutional funding. What happened in the interim is COVID-19 hits. And because of that, both the Republicans, when Trump was still president, and now the Democrats, with Biden as president, have put trillions into the economy, and a lot of that has been directed towards schools. Guess what happened to Scranton School District? They have now a $20 million surplus from all the federal funds that have been put into the school. But the reason I'm talking about long-term reform is, as you and I both know, that's kind of a mirage. That money's going to get spent, and yeah, it got us out of debt now, but the dysfunctional system and the funding system that was inadequate for all those decades will put Scranton right back in the hole again. We're going to go right back in that hole again. So getting back to it, that's why it's so important, I think, what you as a leader in this state are working on. I know you'll work with your governor. So I know there's a question. A judge would be reminding me, Mr. Volpe, you're going to get to a question, so I'll get to it now. What you do with the governor in your Democratic House under your leadership is one part. What's going to happen when you go across the building, so to speak, to President Pro Tem Kim Ward, a Republican with the Republican majority in the Senate, and where are the Republicans on this?
So it's not clear yet. It's too early to find out, but I know that the President Pro Tem, another history maker, Kim Ward, she recognizes, from Westmoreland all the way up, down, or I'll say down to Philadelphia, that there are real needs for students. And we have to figure out as a state, what can we afford to pay? How can we create a new revenue so that we can expand equitable school funding? And what's the time frame in which we implement this? Interestingly enough, the court didn't give us a deadline. Why didn't the court give us a deadline? Because they know that even with our budget, as large as it is and as robust as it is, we don't have unlimited money at the Harrisburg level. We don't print the dollars. They do that down in Washington, D.C. So without the ability to print the dollars, we have to prioritize all these needs, compare them to the other priorities, and see what can we do and how can we be creative. One thing about the President Pro Tem is she builds consensus because she is working on a record of accomplishments and getting things done in her job. So I look forward to having the chance to sit down and talk with her and really brainstorming about what her caucus can get around. How can the majority of her members buy into this? Because many times we know my Republican friends do not want to spend more money. They many times argue we're already spending too much. But when you think about our children and the fact that so many different workforce providers are all saying the same thing, we need employees and we need skilled people who are able to communicate, who've gone through K-12 and are sharp and are smart and intelligent, articulate. That only happens with us investing early. That happens with us having good quality pre-kindergarten for free in rural, suburban, and urban communities. So we have a responsibility. This isn't just throwing money to a problem. This is really addressing the needs also of the shortages we see in the workforce.
Believe it or not, we're halfway through, Joanna, with the show. And we're going to take a short break because, I generally run one of my views, editorial opinions during the show. This one actually concerns Harvard's medical school's about face on LSD. So I'm going to have some fun with that opinion. But at any rate, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Did Harvard overreact 6 decades ago when it fired 1960s counterculture icon Dr. Timothy Leary for what was then termed unethical experiments with LSD? That may be the case, for the Ivy League university is now 1 year in on experimenting with the same hallucinogens Dr. Leary was terminated for. Ironic it may be, but this time researchers say they are on the cusp, through their experimentation, of finding ways to use hallucinogens to treat anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and depression. Jerry Rosenbaum, Harvard psychiatrist and director of Massachusetts General Hospital's Center for Neuroscience of Psychedelics, has said that psychedelics were, quote, remarkably safe, and their psychoactive properties go far back. Dr. Rosenbaum's claim of remarkably safe stands in direct contrast to the latest posting about LSD and other hallucinogens on the United States DEA website, calling it a drug, quote, with a high potential for abuse. It therefore has been labeled as a dangerous Schedule I narcotic. The DEA site also states that the use of LSD and other hallucinogens, such as magic mushrooms, has been known to cause anxiety and depression, the very illnesses this current study aims to treat. As research on hallucinogens is once again in its infancy after a 6-decade hiatus, information on the DEA website said hallucinogens can also cause flashbacks, overdose symptoms, and even death. Indeed, does the new Harvard study provide hope for people with anxiety and depression? There is a pretty high bar to clear if they hope to get to the point where approval from the United States Food and Drug Administration is sought. Was Dr. Leary right? Only time will tell. Welcome back, Madam Speaker. And let's get right in and start with our show airs Sunday. We're actually doing this show on Thursday. And the reason I mention that in the day is you actually broke off that engagement at the very end as it was ending. You had been this afternoon with the President of the United States, Joe Biden. And obviously, I know my viewers would want me to ask, what was the visit about, and what did he have to say, and what is your take on what he had to say?
So President Biden came up to one of our local unions in Northeast Philadelphia to give his budget address, and it's a proposal. It's similar to what I sat through with the governor earlier this week. And the president talked a lot about helping working families. He talked about the rising prescription costs and how every American struggling with diabetes should be able to afford insulin. So he's giving a big shout out to Eli Lilly for reducing the cost and making it more accessible. He is also talking about how union jobs are key to so many of our families getting around the working poor class to middle class, how it's been a passport, and how he's had so much fortune with getting his infrastructure deal done that it's going to be 12 million new jobs within our country. And that has happened within 2 years of his presidency. And he also talked about how to make sure that Americans can afford childcare. We were just talking about the worker shortage. In addition to sometimes people not being prepared for the moment at work, they're also moms and dads who are making the tough decision to forego daycare because it is just so expensive. So he's proposing the return of the child income tax credit, the earned income tax credit, to be able to help parents get money back in their pockets. And that is the type of thing that I hope our congressional delegation will fight for down in DC with our senators, because we need to make sure that working folks, hardworking people, are able to pay their bills. He also talked about, and this is the last one I'll end with, a 9-month reduction in inflation, from our gas prices to our food. So I appreciate his hard work and leadership, and always appreciate him coming to the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection.
Right, absolutely. Well, a couple of just comments on that. I take heart in you being in the front lines, trying to develop policies. I think that's why you were ascended to the speakership position in Pennsylvania, to do just that. You have a Democratic governor that will address it. We have a Democratic president that thought enough of you to be with you personally today to talk about those things. So there's hope there at the end of that. Now having said that, we're going to get back a little bit back to the state. I mentioned to you off camera, for first of all, Governor Tom Wolfe set all kinds of bad records. He was not a friend of this show, even though he was on it. I was a pretty outspoken critic of him because, to me, the compromise and negotiation that has to move government forward did not occur. His view was more of it's my way or the highway, which is great if he had Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate. He did not. So I mentioned to you, and it's kind of funny in hindsight now, usually after a budget address, I would be on this show talking about the Republican response, which were usually short and almost crude to the point. They would say, dead on arrival, would be a usual. I think 2 or 3 budget address got dead on arrival. Another one was no chance. Another one, it'll never see the light of day. This was the first budget address in a long time that there appeared to be bipartisan support. The Republican leadership we've referred to in the Pennsylvania Senate said, well, you know, obviously we're going to negotiate, but we see a lot in it we like, and we have a good starting point. So I'm encouraged for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania going forward, but I would like your bird's eye view of what you think relative to the spirit of bipartisanship that currently exists.
So Governor Shapiro's budget proposal is pretty outstanding. He cuts spending and he lowers taxes. Those are the things that Republicans usually live for.
They do.
So the lack of critique is, it's commensurate with what he proposed. He did not say, let's hit the gas on spending, let's raise people's taxes. In fact, he's making sure that seniors who qualify for property tax and rent rebates, that they'll be able to have a little more income in their pension and still be able to get money back. They said he's let us know that, over 150,000 seniors, if we can raise it from 30,000 to 45,000 in income, will also be able to get money back in their pockets. He looked at some of the leading professions where we need folks to do these jobs, but we haven't seen the earnestness. He wants to give tax credits to nurses, to police officers, to teachers. So if they sign up and they do the job for a few years, every year they can get up to $2,500 cut in their taxes. That sounds like a good incentive to me, whether we are sick at a bedside or whether we are needing first responders to come and save our lives, or whether we need our children's school to be filled with quality teachers. I mean, it's exciting to know that this governor has some bold ideas on how to put money back in people's pockets. And I think the big distinction, to your point, is he served in the legislature. He knows what it takes for us to compromise, get our heads together. He spent many years before being our attorney general, before being a county commissioner down in Montgomery County. He spent many years as a state representative. And he took his time earlier this week to just explain to us what the priorities are, from school funding to making sure seniors have what they need to investing in public safety. These are things that are hot button issues. They're problems in our community. And I'm so glad that he's bold enough to address them by making sure we put our money where our mouth is.
Well, again, I applaud him for that. I was talking, and I talked for years on this show. Governor Wolfe had the dubious distinction of being the first governor ever to not sign a budget in his first term. All went in, you remember, under operation of law. You're well aware of how that went. So that was the level of acrimony. And I am very happy. Our state really needs to move forward at this point. We have the right leadership. We have 2 historical leaders right now, both women, by the way. That's never happened before, obviously, with your colleague Kim Ward in the Senate as President Pro Tem. We also have, I think, a visionary governor. And as you may know, and I think you do know, I am currently a Republican because of some issues I had on various things within the party. But I am who I've always been. For that long period of time I was, for you, as you know, 45 years a Democrat. I have known the governor personally. I have a party that I host in New York City in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Society dinner. I've had that party, believe it or not, for 30 years, all the way back to when I was running for governor, as I mentioned to you. He used to actually show up with former Governor Ed Rendell. He was very young at the time, one of our greatest and most charismatic governors, and I supported Governor Ed Rendell. But at any rate, I have kind of watched his career, and he has legislative experience. He has executive experience, as you mentioned, Commissioner of Montgomery County. So he's in a very unique position to move the state, even with a split legislature, so to speak.
He does, and he has the dedication to do it as well. And that's what's going to be exciting. I worked very well with Governor Wolf. I know some of my colleagues had their challenges about the things that he kept as a priority and where he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't budge on school funding because for him, that was a priority. But I'm looking forward to Governor Shapiro now, being able to get things accomplished for all of us. And that's the exciting thing. He's not saying, oh, let's fund schools in this area more than others. He's saying, no, let's put more money through that fair funding formula. Let's see what we can do for working families who are, deciding jobs based on our minimum wage that's been stagnant. Let's finally put a modest increase there. We know we can't get as high as New York, but we surely shouldn't be lower than West Virginia and Ohio. So we have to be competitive as a state. And that's something that he even talked about, frankly. His competitiveness will make sure that we have achievements, collective ones, through this budget process. So I'm excited about what's to come as we get towards June, when we, of course, start moving different bills as it relates to the budget.
And I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention, again, breaking news today, one of which is you were with the President of the United States on the good end. On the other end, you had some house cleaning in your own Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. Representative Zabel announced today his resignation. He had come under fire recently for charges and allegations of sexual harassment, and that was kind of a black eye, obviously, in the chamber. And so, again, welcome to the speakership. As we've said, uneasy is the head that wears the crown, and uneasy lies the head. So talk a little bit about your leadership in that, obviously. And I have to, again, I'll congratulate you. There was very little messiness in that. It could have been a circus, and it was handled efficiently, quietly, and professionally. So to your credit, as you supervise, especially the Democratic majority in the chamber. So I know you can't talk about the specifics, nor would I expect you to, but you can give us an overview of how you were able to get such an amicable resolution.
So the first and foremost thing is my caucus, we take very seriously any allegations of harassment, discrimination, mistreatment. It's entirely unacceptable. It's not welcome. It, as a woman, is every woman's worst nightmare, especially, and it's not unique. We're not only on the receiving end, unfortunately, but it is a nightmare, that parents have, that mothers have, that something bad happened to their children while they are out and about doing their job when they should be respected. But one thing that is clear is that our caucus has not just said we don't stand for it, but on my first day as speaker, we voted on rules and we made sure that included in those rules creates a brand new process in which any member of the public who has interaction with a state representative that is, disrespectful, unpleasant, any type of discrimination, harassment, that there's a process. We had an ethics committee already, but that ethics committee only oversaw allegations from staff and from other legislators. But now anyone in the public can go online, go to the ethics committee and file a complaint and say, this is what occurred. So an investigation has to happen. And because we created that process, we did not jump up and down demanding that any colleague resign. That's nothing I've done in my entire tenure. I will likely never call on people to leave their job because the voters decide very quickly if they want someone out. They contact their office, they show up, they send emails, they call, they make phone calls. And unlike other jobs, coming up here before this year ends, people will be getting ready to run or to not run. So I am glad that this colleague made a decision that's best for him and his family. But it's a very unfortunate situation, and we stand up for folks who previously didn't have a voice. Under our leadership, the first big accomplishment we had was creating a process and making sure that that process is respected and that it does it in a way where folks know that, where there was no recourse previously within the House, there is now.
Madam Speaker, pleasure. Thank you for your time, and we hope to have you back again as we get closer to that June 30th budget deadline on what compromises are eventually made and where we'll go from there. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to come back.
Thanks, Joanna.